Hey, what is going on, everybody? Bauer brother. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome to the next video in the Blender tutorial series. Okay, so picking up from where we left off, last video we were working on textures. We brought textures into Blender via the Node Wrangler. So hopefully you guys found Node Wrangler helpful, very helpful. All right, it's a big difference between doing textures by hand and using Node Wrangler to do them. No doubt about it. All right, so if you have not, look up look up some kind of maybe the instructions or the how-to manual, or just do a little bit of research on Node Wrangler. There's far too much for me to go over in just this, one or two videos on Node Wrangler. Okay, it's capable of a whole lot. And if you guys are going to be experimenting with nodes, you really, you want to get a handle on that. Okay. So we got our textures in here and we applied them to a material. Now I have two materials going here. I have like a brick and a cement, and I used, a corresponding texture, also like a brick and a cement. And these are both farm sim textures, right? So they both came from the base game. So it was nothing I had to like download or anything like that. Which, by the way, is easy to do. The same way that you added your farm sim textures, you can add third-party textures, whether it's something you created yourself or something you downloaded from the internet. Okay, so we went through all that. Hopefully, you have something that looks reminiscent of what we have here. Now you can see, my brick texture is applied. I put it on the faces. It's in the right areas. So I'm on the right track as far as that goes. But it doesn't look so great, right? You can see it's facing the wrong direction. It's way too big. It just doesn't look good. So it needs to be touched up, right? We need to fix this. So that leads us into what we're going to get into with this video, which is UV mapping and UV unwrapping. Okay, so UV in itself is I think is kind of confusing to some people. Like UV, it's what does it mean? Ultraviolet? Is it what does that mean? All right, so if we go into our editing UV editing workspace here, okay, on the right hand side here is just my typical 3D workspace. All right, now everything that's plotted on here, like all our vertices and anything that we plot in a 3D space, goes off of an X, Y, and Z value. Okay. On the left hand side here, you can see my UV image, which is the concrete. All right. That is only two dimensional. So we work off of basically it would be like an X and a Y. There's no Z, right? So it's just an X and a Y. But to keep from like confusing these two, so every point in space, every X, Y, Z value in this three-dimensional viewport corresponds, or vice versa, actually, every point in this 2D space would correspond to a point in this 3D space. All right, so we have X, Y, and Z values over here, and then U, V, and W values over here in a 2D workspace. So all they did is just back up in the alphabet a couple letters and, use the next three preceding letters. So U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Okay, so X, Y, and Z covers your 3D workspace. U, V, W covers your 2D workspace. I guess it's just a way for them to differentiate the two. So if I'm talking about UV coordinates, I'm talking about UV, not 3D. And what's funny about that is we don't use the W, so just we shorten to UV. Now as far as the coordinates go, right? So we have X, Y, and Z over here, and over here we only have an X and a Y. But you would think that we would use X would be left and right, the Y would be our up and down. Corresponding coordinates for as far as UV goes, U would be left and right, V would be up and down. But when we do any kind of operations in here, we still use X and Y instead of U and V, which I don't know. I just find that kind of funny. But either way, that's what UV is. Okay. It's nothing fancy. It doesn't mean, ultraviolet or anything weird like that. It's just letters of the alphabet. Same thing as XYZ over here. You have UVW over here. That's all that is, right? So don't get confused by that. Okay, so now the UV mapping in itself, okay, is what we do there is we take an image, like looking at this brick image that we have here. I have a lot going on here. I got to find my brick images. Okay, here we go. I have like three of them going on. All right, so we have the brick image, right? That's what we're putting on this wall here. Now, we need to tell it which part of this image we want to be displayed. All right. So basically what we do is we take this face over here, and you can see how when I clicked on that face, it just popped up in this workspace. Right. So that's basically it's just a representation of that face. Okay. Now in this workspace, the mapping part of it is I'm telling it which part of this image I want to be displayed right here. So up top on the toolbar, I'm going to quickly go over, how you navigate, I guess, for lack of a better term, how you navigate the UV workspace. And it's pretty much identical to how you navigate the 3D workspace. All right. So you can see here is the representation of my face here. I can click A on my keyboard to select all points. Now, when I say points, I am in vertex select mode. Okay. Same thing as your 3D. You have a vertex, you have an edge, and then you have a face select. Okay. Now you can grab individual vertexes or vertices or vertex if you want. All right. You can grab just edges if you need just a single edge, or you can grab the entire face if you want to grab the whole thing. All right. Selecting A will select all vertices. G, you can grab it just like you would, anything in your 3D workspace. And if you look in my 3D workspace, you can see the image moving around, right? As I move the corresponding image on my 2D workspace, on my UV editing workspace, you can see it moving around on my brick wall. And this is the mapping part of it, right? So we're telling it I want to map this section of this face to this section of the image. Okay, so maybe I want it in the middle over here. So we're just mapping it. We're telling it where on the image to look. You'll notice some textures when you work with them, or if you look at them, they have it's like a conglomeration of things, just all sorts of things stuck into that one image. It's not even an atlas anymore. There's just all sorts of things in there. Maybe they bake that image, what have you, but that's how they tell what part of that image. You might have, like, say, signs. If you're working on some kind of street signs, you might have your yield sign, your stop sign, a speed limit sign, all sorts of different signs on that one image. And that's how we tell it, which part of that image we want to use. Okay. So we can move things around. So like I said, G, you can grab things and move things around. R, you can rotate. S for scale, you can scale items. So you can do everything, basically everything you can do in the 3D workspace, you can do over here in the 2D workspace. Okay. Now I have the picture of a brick wall here. If you're not seeing that, right, you can go up here to this little image drag down, right? Click on that. And all of the images that you preloaded that are part of that material, okay, will come up over here in this little drag down list, right? So you can just, pick the brick wall that you're working with out of there. Now, in your 3D workspace, you need to make sure you have that material selected. Okay, so if I if I click on the concrete here, the cement, I don't want to be looking at a brick wall. I need to be looking at cement. Now, there used to be a way, not used to be, there probably is. And for some reason, I can't get it figured out that if you're looking at, say, brick right now, okay, we're working on the brick texture, and I click on the cement, that this would automatically change in my UV workspace. The image would change to the corresponding image, to the image of cement. And I had it working once or twice, and I'm like, wow, this is great. It keeps me from having to go up here and, and look for it every time, and change over to brick or cement or whatever I happen to be working on. But for some reason, I can't figure out how I did it, and I can't figure out how to get it back. I've researched it, and I need to put a little bit more work into figuring out how that worked, because it was extremely helpful. But just know that that's how you switch images here. So if I want to go back to working on my brick, I go up to this little image up here, and I just scroll through the list here, and then I find brick. Okay. All right. So now, like I said, this thing is looking kind of weird right now, right? So I need to fix this. So by now, like I said, you can move things around on this image. So since this brick is facing up and down, it makes sense that I want to rotate that, right? So I would just rotate it 90 degrees, which would hit R 90 degrees. Okay. And you can see how that straightened that out. But before we get into all that, pointing things in the right direction, scaling and stuff like that, we want to unwrap this. Okay. So unwrapping, how can I explain unwrapping? Unwrapping, we're basically taking a 3D model, All right. And we need to flatten it so we can apply a two-dimensional texture. So if you think of your texture kind of like wrapping paper, all right. And what we want to do is wrap it around this object to give it a brick texture, right? We want to do it in one big piece. You don't want to have to cut it and do it in individual pieces, which may not be bad. And what I mean by that, like, so let's take this face of the wall, and to unwrap, you want to right click, press U, which brings up your unwrap faces menu, and then just go to unwrap. Okay. Now you can see what it did there is uh, it changed the overall dimensions of that the corresponding box to this face, right? So it better fits this this brick wall here. Okay. And then you can do that to the next face in line. So you can do that. And then this last one here, you can do that again. Now you can see that the bricks on the side and the bricks on the well, not maybe not on the side. I guess it depends what you consider the side, the front. But on each one of these faces, the bricks are a different dimension. They some are bigger, some are smaller, some are pointing one direction, some are pointing the other direction. There's no cohesiveness to it, right? So everything's just kind of all over the place. Now, we could rotate these bricks, right? So we can select everything on the UV panel, rotate it 90 degrees. All right. But they're still not the same size. So at this point, now you're going to have to do some scaling, try to get things, to match up. And the scaling, by the way, is a good way to change like the dimensions of your objects. So if your bricks look too big, you can scale out and make them look a little bit smaller. All right. So now we got them. So they're somewhat the same size, right? But you can see that things don't really match up too well. You can see an obvious seam in the corner, and we're just not looking so great. All right. So what we want to do is we want to unwrap the object. Now you can see that I have a corner here already highlighted in red. So let me go into edge select, and I'm going to select that corner, and I'm going to clear my edge here and a clear seam. Okay. Because what that is what we're doing is we're taking, picture it like a box, like say if this was like a cereal box, and we want to apply a two-dimensional image to that cereal box, right? What we're going to do is open up the box and lay it flat. Then we're going to put, the image on top of it. Think of it like a Christmas gift, right? Christmas just passed. Say you bought it like a basketball for your kid. Trying to wrap that basketball with wrapping paper is damn near impossible, right? It'd be all wrinkly. Just, you'd get it on there. It just wouldn't look so great. It'd be all wrinkly and just, warped in some areas. Not so great. Now, if you were able to flatten out that basketball, like maybe make a couple cuts and have it lay completely flat, it'd be a lot easier to wrap, right? You can put the wrapping paper flat down over top of it. It would look really good. Well, it's the same thing here with this wall. All right. So we want to unwrap these faces. Now, when I say unwrap them, let me see if I can get myself into a different screen here. Okay. Is what we're going to do is we're going to take each section of this wall. So we'll take this front section here, right? And we'll make a cut. We'll make one cut. So basically what we can do is think about that cereal box again. Like if you took one corner of that cereal box and you cut it with the scissors, you'd be able to open it up, right? Like basically like unravel it. So we would have, when you're done, you'd have this longer face. You'd have a shorter face here for the side, maybe a shorter face to the side here. And then you'd have one more long face for that back, right? So that's basically unwrapped. You made a cut. Maybe you made a cut on this corner here, and then you were just able to unwrap the whole thing, and then you could lay it down flat. So that's basically what you're trying to do. You're trying to visualize, what you need to do to be able to get this texture here or this three-dimensional object to lay flat, to flatten it out. So in this case, what I would do is I would select this back corner, and I'd right click, and I would mark seam, M for mark seam. And basically that's the equivalent of taking a pair of scissors, right? So I'm taking a pair of scissors and I'm cutting up along this line, and I'm able to unfold it at that point, basically unwrap it or unfold it, right? So this face here, right, would unfold. I'd pull that out. This would all be connected as one big strip. Okay. So hopefully you're following with this and it makes a little bit of sense. It's kind of hard to explain how UV unwrapping works. All right. And the point behind this, like I said, is if we take, let's say without this seam here, let's go back into seam select. I'm going to get rid of this seam. Okay. Let's clear seam. Back into face select, and I'm going to select all of these faces. Okay. Go back into my UV editing. Okay. And you can see what I have over there in the UV editing. It doesn't look ideal. Everything's kind of different shapes. It's overlapping, and the overlapping is okay with farm sim textures. When we work with the texture atlases and farm sim textures, overlap is okay. But in some instances, it's not, depending on what you're working on. And we'll get into that as we go. But either way, so I select all three faces. Now, depending on your object and depending on the geometry, sometimes this works out a little bit better. You can just unwrap it and everything looks okay. You don't have to go into cutting and making cuts and stuff like that. But it all depends on the object. All right, so we're gonna right click, press U, and then U again for unwrap. Okay, so now you can see what we got there. It doesn't look good at all. All right, so what the heck happened is what's going on here. All right, does not look good. Let's try it one more time. Let's see what our visual representation was. So something here, maybe we have something selected that we shouldn't. It just doesn't look good. All right, so we'll try it one more time. We'll try making a cut here. Okay, so and when you make a cut, it's gonna make a seam when you're done, because that's, like I said, that's where it's gonna be cut. So that's gonna be the start of your texture. It's gonna wrap all the way around, and that's where it's gonna end. So if things don't match up, you're going to see a little bit of a seam there. All right. So let's go back and edge select. So when you pick the edge that you're going to cut, you want to make sure it's hidden somewhere, right? Or at least try to make sure it's a seam that's out of the way. It's not extremely visible. All right. So we'll unwrap it this way. We'll unwrap this as one object. We'll try that again. Okay. Now you can see what we got there. It did a much better job. It's not all warped and crazy looking. It unwrapped it in one piece. Now, unfortunately, it's facing the wrong direction, but that's easily fixed, right? So I said you can manipulate everything over here in your 2D workspace. So we'll select all, rotate 90 degrees. Just like in your 3D workspace, I'm gonna hit G and an X because I want to move it left and right, and I'm just gonna pull that in a little bit. Now you'll notice that I'm half in, half out of that texture, and it's still visible. All right, because that texture is much larger than what you see here on the screen, right? So in this case, you can go above, like you can go outside to the top, to the bottom, left and right, and it'll still be visible. On a lot of the Giants textures, the base game textures, the atlases, you can go left and right outside that image, but you cannot go up and down. So basically, what it comes down to is this image, like I said, it's a little bit larger, but it's repeatable, is what the key thing is here, right? So this image just repeats from top to bottom, from left to right. So you can go outside this image and you'll still be able to see it here. Whereas the the texture atlases for the base game are only tileable from left to right, not from top to bottom. This will make more sense when we get into the garage and stuff like that. I'll explain more of this as we go. Okay, but you can see that it looks much better, right? So we marked the seam, we unwrapped it as one piece, and it looked good. Now, depending on the texture, you don't have to make a seam. You don't have to cut it and do it that way. And I'll show you when we get into the concrete. Sometimes you can do it with just unwrapping individual faces, and it looks okay, depending on what it is. Sometimes your textures don't match up quite right, and you have to do it, as one. And when I say as one with unwrapping, you can see, if you look at this brick here, right, you can see instead of being cut, it wraps right around that corner. And then the same thing with these bricks, right? Just wraps right around. This way, there's no obvious seam or interruption in the texture, right? It just looks like one long texture that's been nicely wrapped around. All right, so what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll pick all these walls. And by the way, if you look over here, you see these two arrows here, this UV sync selection. What that does is it superimposes all of your selections on here at one time. It's kind of confusing because now you're looking at all of them. So if I was to say, like, select just one face, you can see which one of these would highlight over here in my UV workspace. So you can kind of tell which is which, and it goes both ways. So I can pick something uh, from the UV workspace, and it'll highlight, over here on my 3-dimensional workspace, right? So you can see just by selecting, you see which face is which that you're working with. I tend not to use that, too often. It depends. Sometimes it comes in handy. Sometimes it does not. I usually keep it off. All right, so let's select these three faces again, and we're going to scale it down a little bit to get it looking a little bit better. Okay, so oops, let's Control Z. All righty, so we have them all selected. Make sure you have your mouse hovering over here in the UV workspace. S for scale, and I'm just going to bring that out so it's about the height of the image itself. Okay, like so. Now when I look at my wall, it looks much better, right? Everything looks pretty good. The bricks are a pretty respectable size. They wrap around nicely, no problems there. Everything looks good as far as that's concerned. Looks good. All right, so now we can switch over to the post and we can do the same thing with that. We can get in the edit mode. Now I do have a seam on there. Now what I can show you what I mean with doing these individually. Let me go into edge select and I'll get rid of that seam there. So we'll clear seam. And then I'm going to select all four of these faces. Okay. And then let's do it one by one. So I'll show you how you can do each face individually. So I select this face, unwrap it, select this face, unwrap it, unwrap it. Now this is actually unwrapping half decent. Like I said, it depends on your geometry, right? If it's a little bit more complicated, things may not turn out this well. Brick texture, it depends. Sometimes it's easier to get away with. Sometimes it's not. It all depends. Now this, by all rights, I would say you can probably get away with. You could probably get away with, having it just like this without having to make a seam. It's entirely up to you how you want to work that. I tend to do it both ways, see what looks good, what doesn't look good. If it doesn't look good, I make a seam and I just do it that way. There are add-ons available. If you start getting into more complicated meshes, your geometry is more detailed. There are add-ons that you can use for unwrapping, like Unwrap Me and stuff like that. So there are add-ons that you can utilize. So keep that in mind if you want to play around with some of that stuff as you go forward. You'll notice when it comes to farm sim textures and texturing our buildings, there's a lot of unwrapping, but not as a whole where you have to mark a seam and unwrap everything in one big piece. And you'll see as we go along. When I do the garage, it'll make a lot more sense. All right, so I marked the seam. We'll try this both ways. We'll right click, U for unwrap, U again for unwrap faces. So you can see it did a pretty decent job, but they're just facing the wrong direction, which is easily fixable. Just rotate that 90 degrees. Okay, and there we go. So everything looks good. It wraps around the corners like it should. No problems. Okay, so that's what the unwrapping is all about. Now, like I said, you don't have to do them in one big piece if you don't want to. Now, since the brick has, more detailed texture than the bottom does, and this concrete down here, the concrete you could probably get away with a bit easier. So let's pick the concrete or cement texture out of here. Okay. And then from here, I could just right click UU. I just do it really quick. Right click UU. And that's what unwraps our individual faces. And you can see it, and it doesn't look so bad, right? Everything looks pretty decent there as compared to unwrapping it in one long piece. Like I said, by all means, if you want to, like if you like to do things, I don't want to say the correct way. There's more than one way to do most things in Blender. But if you like to stick with that workflow of marking seams, then by all means, have at it. You can definitely do that. Now you can see that it scales things slightly differently. It depends on the geometry that you have selected, right? So this just got, much smaller over here in the UV workspace. So it looks much more zoomed in over here, right? So it doesn't look so hot. So what I would do there is I would just select that again, select everything in the UV workspace, and then that would actually need to be scaled up. So you can scale that up as far as you need to get it looking okay over here in the 3D workspace. Now, the only problem with that is you can see that we have these edges here now, right? And that's kind of how this was meant with this 3D tile. It's so it can, or with this cement, it can be tiled, right? So it's a seamless texture. You can, well, maybe not so much seamless because you can see the seam here, but as you butt one up against the next, right, you can see what we have going on over here in the brickwork here, right? And it's supposed to give it that look, so when you tile this out in a larger area, that's what it looks like. You have like concrete tiles, right? So everything, you're supposed to be able to see that seam. But the way we're using this texture, we don't want that seam there. So what I would probably do is I would unwrap these individually, right? And you try to stay away from the edge. So I would probably just scale that down just a tiny bit, and I would pull that away from the edge because the edge is where that seam sits, right? On each one of these. And you'll be able to see that in your texture if you don't do that. So we can wrap that, scale it down just a tiny bit, and then move that out of the way. And same thing here. GX, move that out of the way. Actually, I forgot to scale that down. There we go. And if it still doesn't look, if you're looking at your texture and it still looks like it's too grainy, too big, then by all means you can scale that out. But just keep in mind that you are going to pick up, some of that overlap, that texture there, or you just use a different texture. The other way you can do it, if you need to, is you can cut it down into smaller pieces. Instead of having such a big piece, you can subdivide that and have smaller pieces. Now you're going to add to your geometry at that point, more faces, more triangles, but the kind of is what it is. It depends what you're working on. You'll notice that you can get away with an awful lot when it comes to farm sim. All right. And that's going to be that for that wall. Now there's something else that I want to go over with you as far as unwrapping. And this is called the UV Smart Project. Okay. And it's kind of a way of unwrapping that you can sort of get away without having to mark all of your seams on a more complicated geometry. So if you take this cap here, right? So we got a lot going on. Normally, if I was going to mark my seams, right, I would probably select these edges here on each one of these corners. I would select all of these. Well, I would do it as one. So I would select the whole corner like that. I'm bricking everything. This is normally how I would do it. I would take the whole object and I would start cutting it up. So when I unwrapped it, it was just easier to unwrap. But for this top part here, I would do all four corners, and then I would mark my seams. And then when you laid that out flat, it would look kind of like a Celtic cross or a Maltese cross or something like that, if you know what I mean. And it would be much easier to texture. But with this concrete, since it's not very detailed, I can get away with a lot. Now I can go through and I can pick each one of these faces individually if I want to unwrap them all that way, which might be kind of a pain in the butt. Now you got to make sure you're in face select, right? For unwrapping to work. You'll notice every once in a while you try to unwrap something and it's not going the way you want. It's doing something goofy. It's probably because you're not in face select. Like I said, it gives you different menus depending on, what area or what mode you're in. That's what I wanted to say. Tripping over my words there. Whether you're in vertex select, edge select, or face select. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to pick all of these this whole top here, right? Now let's have a look and oops, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get out of X-ray. Okay, so you can see what we have selected there. Now it doesn't look so hot, right? Everything is kind of all over the place. This representation here, it's a little skewed. It's not the greatest, right? So let's just go into a normal unwrap and see what we get. All right. So it basically is just an enlarged version of what we had. But I'm sure if we were to zoom in on this and see what we had, all right, you can see things look a little warped there. Maybe not so great. This here is kind of skewed and not looking the best. We can do a better job. Overall, I think it can do a better job. Now, Smart UV Project, what that does is it takes your geometry into consideration, right? So it kind of, you may want to look this one up because I'm going to butcher the explanation, no doubt about it. But like I said, it just considers your geometry. It takes all of your angles and stuff into consideration, and it tries to unwrap it smartly, right? I'm not saying it's smarter than you, but sometimes it does a better job, especially for me. So what we would do in this case, and the way that I typically use this is I'll try to unwrap it and I'm like, ew, that doesn't look good. Then I'll try a Smart UV Project. And most times that does a better job. If it doesn't, then I start getting into breaking down my mesh, making cuts, cutting seams and stuff like that, or unwrapping faces individually. All right. So the way you would use this, it's kind of the same thing as unwrap. You just right click, unwrap faces, and then up top here, you have unwrap, and right below that, you have Smart UV Project. Okay, so you click on that. Don't worry about angle limit, margin method, island margin, anything like that. For what we're doing with Farm Sim, none of that makes a huge difference. Okay. When you get into some projects and you have to like not have things overlap, you have you create what's called an island. And I'll explain that in the next video. You create what's called an island and you need to keep some separation between those. At that point, you would adjust this island margin. But again, we're not using that, so we don't really need to. You can just click OK. Okay, so now you can see that it divided things up much more differently than what we had before. Because, like I said, it takes the geometry into consideration, right? Tries to be smart about it and make much more cleaner cuts, and you can see it did a better job, right? It did a much better job. Maybe a little bit more zoomed in than I would like. And at that point, like I said, you can rescale this, just make it a little bit bigger. But keep in mind, you're going to be picking up some of those seams. I can see one across the top there already. And at that point, you just need to use your own judgment. If you need to unwrap things individually, you can unwrap just this face individually, the one that has the seam. Or what you could do is you can move, that would be a left and right thing. You can move it left and right, and you can put that seam someplace where it's not so noticeable. So it's kind of up to you. You have to use your judgment as you go along with these things. Okay. So we have that unwrapped. That looks pretty good. And then the bottoms, we'll just do those individually like so. Okay. And we'll zoom in really quick to see how that looks. And it doesn't look bad. I can't really see my seams. Even though I didn't scale things down, I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now here you can see the bottom of the wall. I can see the seam coming through. But to me, that doesn't look so bad. I would kind of expect that on a concrete wall. Like I said, this is kind of your own judgment, how you feel, things should look. If it doesn't look good to you, you just kind of redo it. Redo it and get things to the point, where they look okay to you. Okay, now I'm going to select this top runner. Another good way to select things here is, I don't know if I went over this. So let's take the wall, for example. Okay, so I could either select all of the cement and just hit select, right? And that'll select all of everything with the cement objects, or the cement material applied to it. I'm sorry. But another way to do this is if we just have just the wall selected, okay, you go in here. What I like to do is I'll pick all of the easier faces. Okay, so I'll pick just the maybe just these 4 faces here, because that's the brick material. And I'll hit Control I for invert. So I want to select the inverse, and it'll select everything, the inverse of what I just had selected. All right. Now, in this case, you have to go through and unselect some things because I just did this bottom and I don't want that done. And you could, if you wanted to, like if you had, say, this bottom selected, right? So now I have all of my cement material on one object. I have all of that selected. Okay. So let's try a smart UV project here and see what we get. Okay. And really, it does not look bad. Looks pretty good. So we'll check out the top. All right. It's not so bad. It looks okay. All right. Overall, it doesn't look bad. So like I said, there's much more than one way to get around how you want to do these things. Okay. And that's in a nutshell, the process of unwrapping is just transferring this face over here, over to this two-dimensional image, right? So you can kind of line things up and get things looking good. Okay. Now, with that being said, there's a couple things you want to keep in mind as you're doing this. One, make sure that with your objects, you have your scale, that your scale is correct. Okay. So when I go into item here, I can make sure everything is 1, 1, and 1. Everything looks good. If you don't, you'll start seeing some warped images. Like you'll have a lot of stretching going on. Things are not going to look so great with your textures. All right. So if you start unwrapping and you're like, ew, that looks really bad, go and check your scale. Make sure your scale is okay. Okay. The other thing that you want to do is make sure, like say for this brick wall here, I'm not sure what I'm on here, whichever, let's go back to the wall. It doesn't matter. Whatever you have selected. All right. So if I want to do this brick, make sure you have the right material selected. All right. So if I'm on cement accidentally, because I do this all the time, I'm on cement, I unwrap it, it will unwrap it according to the texture that's assigned to it. Right. So if I have cement highlighted here and I unwrapped it, it would give me different dimensions. It would give me a different unwrap depending on the texture. Right. So like I said, just make sure you'll find this out. You'll stumble across it as you're working. You're like, wow, it gives me two different, depending on the texture, it gives you two different unwraps. Just make sure you have the right one selected. Right. So maybe this one you're working with a tileable texture. It's tiled four ways, where a color atlas or a texture atlas is not tileable four different ways. It's only tileable left to right. Okay, so it will unwrap a little bit differently depending on your material. Just make sure you have the correct material selected. That's all I wanted to say about that. I just kind of did it in a confusing way. That's all. All right, so that's kind of it. Once we have everything lined up on our UV maps, everything looks good as far as that goes. You don't have to worry about in your UV maps, you don't have to worry about keeping everything separate. Okay. You can see how mine looks. It's all over the place, and that's fine. Okay. It doesn't matter if things are overlapping. It doesn't matter that I'm scaled outside the image. You'll find out quickly when you're working on a certain image here, if you try to scale it outside its bounds and you can no longer see it on your 3D model, well, then that just means it's not tileable, right? You just can't do that. You have to stay within the texture. So it's easy enough to figure out what's going on there. That's not difficult at all. Okay. All right. And in this case, everything I think looked pretty good. I would say this is ready for export. You just make sure that, like I said, your scale is okay. 1, 1, and 1. You want to check your points here, right? Your origin points, and make sure those are where you want them. Because when you bring this object into Giants Editor, it's going to bring it in at this point and it's going to rotate around that point. So make sure that's okay. Your scale's okay. Textures are looking good. I say we're ready to go. So we can Control S to save this. Select these two objects, or we're going to go into Giants i3D exporter. So you can either select both of them and export selected, or you can just select neither and hit export all. But it's export all I tend not to use because I usually have a lot of other things in my collection and not all of them I want to export. So I just got myself in a habit of using export selected. Okay. And make sure you have your location set. This folder here is just setting your location, right? It's telling it where you want it to export to, and the name you want it to export under. Okay. So what I'll do here is I got everything selected. I'm going to hit export selected. Okay. We're going to get into my GE here. Let me get myself into an area where we can see what's going on. Like right here. Okay. We'll bring this back up, and I want to get into, let's see where I exported this to. We'll start a new folder here. Okay. So I was in probably this folder here. Let's go to documents, 3D tutorial series. There we go. And there's my basic wall. All right. And we just want to drag that in there. Now, in most cases, not in most cases, in all cases, if you plan on using this basic wall that I just made here, this i3D, you want that to be in your project files, right? Your map project. Make sure that's somewhere in there. Now, this you can see is not part of my map. So if I was to release this map out into the world somewhere, it would not work correctly for them. That wall would not show up. It works good for me because it's hosted on my computer. So it doesn't matter where I brought it in from. I'll do this a lot for testing. I'll test it outside of my map. I'm actually going to delete this quickly because there's something I wanted to show you. I forgot to. All right. Going into this tutorial series folder here, right, where I exported it to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the i3D first, and I'm going to open that up. I'm going to open it up with Notepad. All right. Now you can see what I have here. Here is the literal file path to the textures that I was working with. Okay. That's not what we want. Do you remember the whole $sign data thing? That's what we want to use. Now, let me see. Let me go back in the Giants editor. I do have the game location set up. Now, in older versions of the exporter, as long as you had everything set up to the data folder, right? That's the file path you wanted it to point to your data folder on the base game, and your file paths would show up correctly. For some reason, they just, it could be and probably something I'm doing wrong. I mean, I don't see Giants releasing a broken exporter, although that's not out of the realm of possibility. They already have something about it that I'm pretty sure it doesn't work, and I'm pretty sure it's on their end why it's not working. But either way, like I said, when I get into looking at this, it does not have the dollar sign data. So what I normally do is everything, I want to keep data forward, right? So that this is what I want to keep. I want to keep this part of it, and this other part I want to replace with a dollar sign. So what I'll do is I'll highlight this, okay, and then I'll hit Control H, right? So that brings it up under the find what, and I want to replace it with a dollar sign. So I'll hit replace, then I'll hit in selection, and I'll select everything down bottom here, and then I'll hit replace all. Okay. So you want it to look like this in the end. Long story short, this is what you want. Dollar sign data map. So you just want to give it the shortcut, the dollar sign data shortcut, and then you can save that. Now, under most objects that I work on, at this point, what I would do is I would open up this wall or whatever it happens to be in its own window, right? I wouldn't drag it immediately into my map. I would open it up in Giants Editor in its own version of the editor, which I'm doing here, and we'll get things fixed. Now you can see what's going on here. This is why I said that I think that Giants themselves did something a little goofy, because we had our textures set correctly within Blender, but you can see what's going on here. It doesn't look so good. And what happens is on this, if I look at the brick texture, they have the specular map is where the diffuse goes. This albedo map, by the way, is where your diffuse goes. All right. So, and this happens on every one of my models, every one of them. It doesn't matter if it's a Giants texture, it's a PBR, or something I created myself. It mixes things up. It always puts the specular where the albedo goes. That's why I think it's a goof up on Giants' end. I think the code is just not looking, it's not putting the right things in the right places, because they were right on our end. We did it correctly. All right. So from here, you need to fix things. And this is what I was talking about in previous videos, or maybe even earlier in this video, that you can get away with just using one texture inside of Blender. You can just maybe assign, say, the diffuse, because that's what you're working with. You want to, visually, you can see the best when you're working with the diffuse. All right. Because you're going to have to come in here and straighten things out anyhow. So kind of is what it is. So from here, you just kind of select the correct texture. We want to go up, look for our brick that we had here. I passed it already. So you pick your brick diffuse. Okay, we'll open that. Now, if you're using a texture that is not Giants and it's like, say, a PNG, when you click OK here, it'll ask you if you want to convert that over to a DDS. Absolutely tell it yes, you want to convert it to a DDS, because when you run it through Test Runner and it's not a DDS, it's going to throw an error for that. And I think even it might generate a warning just under, like when you play the game, it's going to generate some kind of warning saying it's not a DDS file. The only thing I did notice with their conversion tool, when it converts everything over to DDS, it does not generate bitmaps. Right here, you can see on their texture, it has 7 bitmaps. And this is important because that will also generate an error. Not only that, but it helps with the game, right? Resource wise and stuff like that. You want to have bitmaps associated with your image. All right. And if, like I said, their conversion tool seems to not generate bitmaps, and at that point, you would have to open that up inside of, Photoshop or GIMP or something like that and recreate that DDS file. Just resave it, basically, because most of those applications will ask you if you want to save it with bitmaps, and you just tell it yes, and you will assign bitmaps for you. Just wanted to throw that out there. But anyhow, like I said, what we're doing is we're just straightening this out. All right. Now we want to go down to gloss map, and we need to pick the specular map. Under gloss, that's the specular that goes there. So you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys already know this stuff. All right, we can click OK. And then our normal map is probably correct, which it usually is. And we're good with that. Now, there is bit of a difference here, or something that we could have done differently. With this brick wall texture, okay, there is there was a height texture available with that one. And with that height texture, what that means is we could use that parallax occlusion. We can use that on this wall because it has a height map associated with it. Now we did not. Now to be able to use that, you'll see if you try to use it, there's a step that needs to be done here. And if you try it without that step, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to this new create new shader here, replace or add new shader. And I'm going to pick building shader. Okay, we'll open that up. Okay, now you can see this come up. The currently selected shape does not provide the following vertex attribute, blah, 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 text chord 1. Okay, and you can see that doesn't look so good. You may or may not have come across this at some time in, in the past, and there's a way to get around this, all right? And I'll show you what it's missing. To be able to use the dirt mask or to be able to use like the height map and things like that, it requires an additional UV map. All right. And what we would do from there is, I'll get past here. Let me close this up really quick. I'm not going to save this. Actually, I probably could have saved it. We'll go into Blender. Okay. So let's say you went through all that and you say, hey, I do want to use that height mask. I want to include some parallax occlusion mapping here. I want to get fancy, and that's what I want to do. All right. So once we're inside of here, over on the right-hand side, you see this little triangle looking thing with a circle on each corner, on each point. Click on that. It says data. Okay. In this list here, right, you'll see a section here for UV maps. So click on that. All right. Now make sure you have, like, say if I have my post highlighted, because this works per object. All right. You just want to click the plus sign, assign it a new UV map. Okay. And then go back down the wall and then do the same thing there. You want to do this for each object that you have in your collection, or at least each object that you plan on applying or using that parallax occlusion mapping with. Okay. The thing to remember with that is when you added the new UV map, it automatically selected it. So if you were to do more work on this object here, right, say, you're trying to unwrap things, and as you're unwrapping it, you cannot see the changes. Like nothing's taking, like what's going on here? You're making changes. You can't see the new textures, like just nothing's going right. You have to check over here in your UV window, see how it has UV map 001. It automatically selected that new map. So you can either go over here on the right-hand side to your UV maps and you can click on the correct UV map, or you can go up top here and just select it out of this list. So what's going on is when those changes aren't taking effect, things aren't looking quite right, it's because you're on the wrong UV map. Just want to get back into the right UV map and you'll be good to go. All right. So from here, you would just save it with that extra UV map. Click, select both objects, export selected. All right. Go back into tutorial series and we're going to open that up again. We'll try this one more time. Give us a second to start up here. All right. And there we go. Everything's green again, of course. I really, truly do believe this is on Giant's end because this did not do this with the other versions of the exporter. The other versions of the exporter seem to work okay. This one definitely has some issues, but is what it is. They're easily fixed. So we'll just kind of go in here and we'll pick out our brick wall diffuse. Yes. Okay. We'll pick out the gloss map and pick that out. Okay. Normal map was okay. So from all outward appearances, this looks pretty good. Like I said, you can use that, in one of your projects with no problems. Everything looks okay. Let's see. From here, if you wish to use the parallax occlusion mapping, I'm going to go down here to custom shaders. Now make sure you have one of your textures highlighted like brick here. All right. Go down to shader source. We're going to add new, and you're going to add a building shader. Okay, now you can see with that extra UV map, I didn't generate that text coordinate error, didn't come up. All right, so for variation, you want to pick custom parallax. Now down bottom here, you'll see some custom textures. This is where you want to select your height map and your dirt shader if you're going to use them. This very first one here, where it has default specular, that would be your dirt shader. Now, if you have a dirt shader mask set up, you can leave this at default specular. That's not a problem. Or you could go in. Now, this doesn't make a difference. You don't have to do this. You can pick the specular map that belongs to that brick wall. So you can pick brick wall specular, open that up, assign it. Now you can see things got a little bit darker, which is fine because, now it no longer has that, freshly painted, brand spanking new, ultra clean look to it. It looks a little bit, not dirty, but I tend to use them. I like it better. And anyhow, the custom texture number 4 is where your height map goes. Right now, it has a default height map assigned to it, and we want to assign the height map that belongs with this. So you'll want to go back to maps, map US, textures, and then pick the brick wall height. Okay. And you'll see that all that is, it's kind of a grayscale version of like our brickwork here. It looks like it has some kind of alpha component attached to it as well. All right. As a matter of fact, you can tell because it's a BC4 that it must have some kind of alpha component to it. But anyhow, click OK. And that is it. Now your parallax is set to this model. Now to see what that does, you might think, well, that didn't really do anything. Like I said, it's kind of like a normal map on steroids. We just added an extra element to your normal map, right? We just added a little bit more height information than a normal map is capable of on its own. And this wall looks pretty good. Now, if you go up here to where it says bump depth, right? And you start selecting these, you can see what that height map does, right? So when you pull this out, you can actually adjust the height. Right now, all the way out doesn't look so good. So you just want to bring that in a little bit until you got a pretty good look to it. All right. Like I'd say somewhere in there looks pretty good. 0.11. You don't want to get too carried away with it because you can get it looking pretty ugly pretty fast. All right. So let's have a look at that and see what it looks like. Now, some textures you'll notice inside of Giants, they have a height map. Some don't. The US map and the French map tend to have the height maps. The Alpine map does not. They don't use much parallax in the Alpine map. Some textures hold up well to it, some don't. All right. So you don't need to apply just because it has a height map doesn't mean you need to apply it. It doesn't look good on everything. Things like bricks and cobblestone and everything that has like a height element to it, it will look good on. But like say a painted wall or something completely flat, you may not need that. Okay. And that's right here. That is a finished product that has, the height map included, right? So your parallax occlusion mapping is all good. Your post, I didn't have to do anything with that I'm not post, I'm sorry, the cement, because there was only 2 textures that were involved with that and they're both in the right places. Now, the other thing that you want to do from here, normally what I do is I'll select both of these objects and I'll control G and I'll put them into a group. And, we'll just give us a name like say brick wall. Okay. And the other thing you want to do is you want to go in and pick each one of your objects and go over into your attributes here on the right-hand side, right? And where it says rigid body, you want to select rigid body, and underneath shape, you want to make sure cast shadow map and receive shadow map. Make sure those 2 are checked. All right. So this way it'll be a solid object when you bring it into your map. All right. So you won't be able to walk through it or just drive through it with your tractor or something like that. It'll be an actual solid object. So many people miss this step. I can't count the number of maps I've seen where you can just walk through an object. And I miss it a lot on my own. I have to come back tons of times and fix these things. And you really need to burn this into your memory to make sure you take care of this while you are in this stage. Because what happens is when you forget and you bring this into the map and you start laying down your wall, now you have 100 different sections of this laid out on your map somewhere that need to be fixed, right? Sometimes you can use the replace function, not always. So just keep that in mind. All right. And then from here, you just want to save it. Okay. We can get out of here. We'll bring up the map that we were just in, bring up the window we were just in, minimize that so it's not so big. Like I said, make sure, why is that? Geez, problems today. Make sure this basic wall and the shapes file is somewhere in your project folder if you intend on using it. Okay, and I just kind of drag that into your map. Alrighty, and then from here we can get me out of whatever mode I'm in there. Oh, I guess I'm not in a mode. Control B, we'll set that down. Okay, and there you go. There is your wall, and I think it looks pretty good. I would definitely use that wall in any one of my maps, right? And I just might. So not hard at all. It's not a difficult process to assign textures to your models, and get everything imported into Giants Editor. All right. So this video went on a lot longer than I wanted to. I'm knocking an hour here. So like I said, a lot longer. But hopefully that explains some things to you. If it didn't, don't worry. We're still going to do the garage, and I will explain some other things as far as, unwrapping and stuff like that. Some things that make a little bit of a difference. We'll be working with the texture atlases this time, and we'll be using much more than just these two textures, right? We'll be using some wood texture, some roof shingles. So we'll be doing that garage, and we'll have it looking nice by the time that it's done. All right, and I'll show you some shortcuts, and so we'll just keep working on this. So my whole point here was just to kind of introduce you to some of the terminology and the basic workflow of what UV unwrapping and UV mapping and stuff like that. What all those things are in the basic workflow. All right. So I'm going to leave things right there. Like I said, next video, we'll start texturing the garage. We'll do a little bit of work with that. And that's going to be it. So with that being said, I am Bauer Brown, and I will see you on the next one.